You know what continues to shock me year after year, even though it really shouldn't? The teams that consistently underperform. The ones that just can't seem to get anything actually going out there. Whether it's due to the coaching staff, the front office, or ownership, or any strange combination of the above, there are just certain teams out there that look like they are destined to fail.
I think we're close, and obviously it's not what anybody wants to see, and it's frustrating and disappointing, but we're going to stick together, and I really feel like we're close. You know, we got good enough players to win these games, so we should keep going to work.
Football fans love to tout the NFL as the professional sports league with the most parity in it. It is one of the most constant selling points you hear nowadays, especially with the onset of the hated super teams in the NBA. And while at times it does feel like there's parity in the NFL, the fact of the matter is there are still some organizations that are so incompetent that you won't see them win a Super Bowl anytime soon. They, along with their diehard fan bases, are, well, doomed. So, without further ado, let's take a look at 10 NFL teams that won't win a Super Bowl title in your lifetime. First up, perhaps at this point, the most obvious entry on this list, the Houston Texans. When it comes to organizational chaos, there may be no more exemplary model in all of professional sports, let alone the NFL, than the Texans. I mean, the franchise has a lifetime record of 135 and 169, a solid 24 games under .500. Not to mention the fact that they've never made it past the divisional round of the playoffs. The crazy thing about that is, they had a stretch during J.J. Watt's prime in which they made it to the postseason 6 out of 9 seasons, which really speaks to how pitiful the team has been beyond the time they were carried by a generational defensive talent. And you know what? They almost deserve a pass. After all, they were the 32nd and, at the moment, final addition to the NFL, which is obviously a disadvantage. But after watching the way that things have fallen apart over the past couple of seasons, after finally providing their fan base with a glimmer of hope, well, my confidence in the team has never been lower. The Houston Texans went from a team that was a quarterback away to having that franchise quarterback to now allegedly running a smear campaign against that quarterback, leaking his alleged off-the-field transgressions to lower his negotiating power in a contract dispute. Now they've reached the point where their relationship with star quarterback Deshaun Watson appears to be completely untenable. And in souring that very relationship, they may have made the organization's most valuable asset completely untradeable. It looks like the Texans are headed towards a full-on fire sale at this point. Hence why everyone and their mother is picking them to finish at the bottom of the NFL standings in 2021. If this were a more competent ownership group, that would be one thing. But its foundational fractures seem to be what created this abysmal situation. It wasn't great beforehand, but after the passing of the team's founder, Bob McNair, in 2018, it always seems like someone new is making the decisions in Houston. Moral of the story, don't go putting bets on the Texans anytime soon. Staying in the AFC South, we have another lowly, relatively young organization, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, in my honest opinion, we will never see hoist the Lombardi Trophy, at least not in our lifetime. The Jaguars were established in 1993, and believe it or not, their all-time team record is actually worse than the Houston Texans, standing at 177 and 239, a neat 62 games under 500. Yikes. At least Jacksonville had some playoff success in recent years, coming within a sketchy officiating decision of defeating the New England Patriots in the 2017 AFC Championship game. There is some semblance of hope in Jacksonville these days, with Urban Meyer at the helm and Trevor Lawrence having been taken number 1 overall out of Clemson. That, I can admit, is a good start to getting an organization turned around. But at the end of the day, we have to remember what team it is that we're talking about. These are the Jacksonville Jaguars after all. This is the organization whose fan base was all juiced up over the prodigal return of Tom Coughlin a few years back, but next thing they knew, Coughlin's old-fashioned ways had inadvertently pit the organization against the players' union. And by old-fashioned ways, I mean basically he was such a jerk to the players and crossed the line so many times that over 25% of the grievances filed league-wide were against Jacksonville. That's insane! Especially considering that he was working in a front office role and not as a coach. Talk about a what can go wrong will go wrong situation. Their hero returned only to have it blow up on them. Now, we sit years removed from the progress that Coughlin had made, and almost every key player from that Jacksonville team is gone. That's not to say that Urban and Trevor won't be able to make a run of their own. I'm just always skeptical of the organizations that have these reputations for epic meltdowns. Hey, let's just hope for the sake of the Jacksonville faithful that their biggest problem is only the team not winning a Super Bowl and not them hopping across the pond and moving to London. While we're talking about the woes of the NFL's new age franchises, we may as well mention the Carolina Panthers. They were established 2 years after the Jags, and while they actually had a lot of success for an expansion franchise, I mean, hey, 2 NFC championships is nothing to gloss over. But I just don't have a ton of confidence that they'll be hoisting the Lombardi Trophy in our lifetime. For starters, one of their NFC titles came during the peak of Cam Newton's career, and while Cam is clearly not a perfect player, there's no denying his pure talent. So unless another otherworldly dual-threat quarterback comes to town, it'll be a tall order for the Panthers to get back to the big game. Especially considering the dysfunction we've seen down in Carolina since Jerry Richardson was forced to sell the club back in 2018. Hopefully David Tepper is a better person than Richardson, but that won't do the team much good on the field if he can't get the right pieces in place operationally. Moving on from the sad state of affairs for the NFL's younger teams, how about we touch on the New York Jets and Miami Dolphins, a couple of older AFC East teams that you will never see win a Super Bowl in your lifetime. But hey, small disclaimer here. This one applies provided you were born after 1974, once the Dolphins had completed their back-to-back Super Bowl title runs, one of which included their legendary undefeated season. But anyway, things are not looking so bright for them or their AFC East brethren. Miami has had only 4 postseason appearances since the turn of the millennium, and while the Jets have racked up 6 playoff berths, none of them come in the 2010s. And their organization might actually be even more doomed than the Dolphins. At least Miami has Brian Flores at the helm, who seems to have a big plan for the organization. He joined the team in 2019 when it was at utter rock bottom after 3 seasons under one of the worst head coaches in NFL history, Adam Gase. Coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, considering how many of these terrible teams make equally dumb decisions, that is effectively where the Jets find themselves today. The organization also endured Adam Gase at the helm for 2 seasons, and man, it was ugly, capping off a 9-23 record over 2 years with a horrific 2-14 season in 2020. But the reason that these 2 teams will never take home the Lombardi Trophy goes beyond the mediocre players on the field and the questionable coaching hires that they've made in recent years. In the NFL, these kinds of decisions, particularly for bad teams, trickle down from ownership groups that either make terrible hires for the general manager role or think that they, for some reason, have a gift from above and will be able to handpick the next coach or draft pick or whatever. And that is exactly what we've seen from the Jets and Dolphins owners. Both Woody Johnson and Stephen Ross are true blue meddlers. We saw it with Woody back when the Jets had their love affair with Tim Tebow, and we're watching a similar situation now as Ross has allegedly inserted his team into the Deshaun Watson saga, despite having just recently invested a 5th overall pick in a young quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. So until these guys can actually take a step back and let the true football minds in the organization do their thing, I truly believe that these teams, and unfortunately their fan bases, are destined for disappointment. It's not too dissimilar from what we've seen with the Las Vegas Raiders in recent years. They haven't won a title since 1983, so a little bit more recent, but for our younger fans, no reason to expect them to turn it around. As entertaining as Mark Davis is to follow along with on the internet, I don't know that he always makes the most sound football decisions. Cough, cough, I'm looking at you, John Gruden, you and your 10-year contract. Maybe the move to Vegas will breathe some life into this once great organization, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. Next up, we have 3 of the NFL's older franchises, who, for all their storied traditions, have not given their fan bases a whole lot to cheer about. First up, the Cleveland Browns. We're leading with them because they probably have the most hope here with the talented young core that they're building around Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett. But that being said, this is still the Cleveland Browns we're talking about. And they are not at all that far removed from their 3-year stretch in which they won only 4 games, including their infamous 0-16 campaign in 2017. Woof. As far as I'm concerned, the Browns have been the worst franchise this millennium. So until I see them win a title, I'm more than comfortable asserting that they won't win one. Speaking of 0-16, how about the Detroit Lions? The only other team to have finished a season with that inglorious record. They, like Cleveland, have largely been the model of dysfunction in the modern NFL. Whether it's burning through valuable draft picks, famously selecting wide receivers in the first round 3 consecutive years only to effectively whiff on all 3, or having 2 generational all-time talents in Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders retire early because the organization was that incompetent. This team has never offered much promise, which is sad because the Lions have one of the most dedicated fan bases out there, as do the Chicago Bears, a once heralded organization that now seems to merely be living off its singular Super Bowl title over 35 years ago. Now they've become a punchline in the NFL, where they seem to always be making the wrong decisions, like trading up to take Mitchell Trubisky instead of drafting Patrick Mahomes, or keeping Ryan Pace as general manager despite the fact that he continues to make questionable personnel moves. Hey, remember when they hired Mark Trestman as their head coach, despite his success primarily having come while coaching Canadian football? Yeah, and you want me to believe that this band of fools is gonna put it all together for a Super Bowl run? Ha! No chance. Our last entry, the Washington football team, is the team that has most recently won the Super Bowl, having taken it home in 1991. So our deepest apologies to any of our older fans who feel misled. But how can you look at this team and expect them to do anything good as long as Dan Snyder is at the helm? He can ceremoniously hand over power to his wife, a move that may or may not be an evasive legal maneuver, and he can bring in an NFL legend like Ron Rivera to try and change the culture. But in the nation's capital, I utterly refuse to buy back in early. They are on a prove-it basis. End of story. Snyder has proven to be a meddling, incompetent POS too many times before for me to give him or his team the benefit of the doubt. But hey, which team do you think is least likely to win a Super Bowl during your lifetime? Did we miss any? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.